That's just it. I don't know whether it's appropriate to say it or not. It's tricky because we forgot to mention that this is sponsored content, but as always, it's honest. Did you lie at any point here?
No, I didn't lie. So, roughly what are we supposed to talk about?
You know what? At the beginning, we'll mention that everyone has been pointing out lately that we have audio issues. And you're right, because we bought a bunch of Chinese equipment, expensive Chinese audio recording gear, and we keep having problems with it. And now from the top, we're going to talk about the Voge 300, which in my opinion is much better than our audio recording equipment. Go ahead, Lechu.
Yeah, I don't think it has the tendency to randomly shut itself off while working. However, it does have one issue. The cooling fan for the engine tends to turn on very frequently. But listen, I've ridden it for a good few hundred kilometers, maybe even around 1,000. And let me say this, nothing fell off, nothing broke, nothing came loose, and nothing vibrated. Unlike the Chinese recording equipment, right?
When thinking about this video, I asked myself, how much should a touring motorcycle cost? I've already asked this before. You have a lot of experience on the Polish market where people complain that everything is too expensive. In your opinion, how much should a touring motorcycle cost, and is this one too expensive or reasonably priced?
Listen, it's hard to say if it's too expensive because there aren't many cheaper motorcycles.
That's true.
There just aren't many cheaper touring motorcycles on the market. Without the panniers, it costs 18,500, and among the 300cc bikes tested, that is, the Zontes plus the BMW stands out very clearly as being much cheaper. So whether 18,500 for a Chinese 300cc bike is a lot or a little is hard to say. But listen, most people will say, yeah, it's nice and all, but still too expensive. You know, I can't really say where the lower limit is, the point where people say, hey, that's a reasonable price. But, you know, if you truly wanted to have a touring motorcycle with very similar specifications and impressive capabilities to this particular Vogue, there just isn't a significantly cheaper one available on the market, right?
I've already mentioned before that I had something like that. We both went through the era when these Chinese motorcycles were just scraping the bottom in terms of quality. And as you already said, it was simply because dealers rushed to sell these vehicles as cheaply as possible, even at market stores. And that stuck in the memory of Polish motorcyclists. And so I approached it with some skepticism, but after riding it for a bit, I thought, damn, the brakes aren't anything special, but they work. The suspension absorbs bumps, the engine accelerates, it's fuel. Injected, there's no way it wouldn't accelerate smoothly, even in a high gear. So I guess we really need to change the way we think about Chinese bikes altogether.
Well, in a sense, you're probably right. But the best recommendation for this motorcycle is that it's basically made by the same company which is launching. Granted, it's made in a different factory and under slightly different technological standards, but it's produced by the same company that makes the BMW G310, right? And hardly anyone complains about the build quality there, or that they break down, or that, you know, something's wrong with them, they just don't break down. And, you know, there's no reason why this motorcycle should break down or fall apart either. My theory is also that people have been learning how to make these motorcycles for, let's say, at least 130 years now, and they've simply learned how to do it, right? You know, all those early teething problems with motorcycles are long gone. Now there are only, how should I put it? You know, just some minor, really minor issues, right? We talked about that too. Here the gearbox is rather clunky. And the tires are absolutely not adventure ready. They're purely road tires. Yes, but thanks to the fact that the tires are completely for asphalt, I managed to test the crash bar's durability. And as you can see, nothing happened to the motorcycle.
Exactly. Crash bars are just well. The Chinese like big crash bars. But that's actually a good thing when we consider that this motorcycle is aimed at two groups. Beginners who might happen to drop the bike. And as you mentioned, those who are at an age where they've grown into riding small displacement motorcycles.
That's true. You know what? Listen, you asked me maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago if I like riding a motorcycle in the city. You asked me, I think, when you were getting on, if not the Multistrada, then something like that. I said, man, I really like it, but you couldn't get me on this thing even with a stick. Simply put, a motorcycle for city riding needs to be, small, light, and agile. And this Vogue ticks all those boxes, right? For me, riding a heavy car in traffic jams is just, well, not very appealing at all.
You rode it for over 1,000 kilometers. I know that one time you even did a longer trip on it. Is it possible to ride on the highway? Or would you rather avoid the highway? How does it handle maintaining speed? Because let's be honest, it's a single cylinder, small engine, just over 20 horsepower.
Yeah, compared to other 300cc bikes, I'd say it definitely has less horsepower. However, the manufacturer states the top speed as 130 kilometers per hour. I saw 140 on the speedometer, not a bit more, which more or less confirms the 130 kilometers per h speed. However, when you're riding on the road, maintaining that speed is realistic. A cruising speed is, let's say, around 120. And you know what? For highway speeds, that just wouldn't be enough for me. But for me, since I rarely drive on highways and mostly stick to local roads, doing some touristy adventure riding, 120, actually SIM7 on some roads in the Missouri or Podlasie regions, that's even too much. So for local roads, yes, and for highways, if someone likes to go 120, that's fine too, but in my opinion, not really.
And as for purely touristic qualities, well, I'm a bit of a tourist ignoramus. I get on the motorcycle and just need to get to my destination. And what are your observations when it comes to the windshield, the wind deflector? You mean packing luggage and things like that? Let's be honest, you've ridden way more kilometers than I have.
Listen, I really like the windshield. I'm not really a fan of those huge, well, you have to unscrew it all the way. Electronic gadgets, you just have to activate them or control them manually. So you have to unscrew the knob and lower it down. It only has 2 positions and that's it. But it works because I set it in the upper position. I didn't need to set it in the lower position and that suits me.
Let's be honest, the adjustment is pretty simple and effective.
Yeah, exactly. And regarding the luggage, I have to praise the sturdiness of this rack. You can really strap a lot onto it. The rack is solid. You can attach quite a lot of stuff to it. What's more, the motorcycle is also offered by the importer with a set of side cases, although I think you have to pay extra for them. I don't know, for such a set it's about 3,500 or something like that. Nevertheless, there is something to attach them to.
I'm wondering if there are any other observations. Actually, that's another thing I was thinking about. I'm looking for some advice for people who might be interested in this motorcycle, or maybe a bigger one, maybe a bit more expensive. Because let's be honest, we all count our money, and there's always that moment when buying equipment where you could always add another 1,000, 2,000 or 5,000. Stretch yourself a bit more financially, but in theory buy something better. Let's assume a budget for a branded motorcycle from brands we know and are used to. A bit bigger, that would be around 40,000 zlotys. What would you do in your place? Would you prefer to spend a bit more on a motorcycle we already know? Would you prefer that? Or does this satisfy you and you'd rather save the money for trips, excursions, or anything else?
I mean, listen, such a motorcycle would honestly satisfy me completely for riding. I'm at an age now where, my friends' jokes don't really impress me anymore, nor does the mockery about what I'm riding. But you know what? Since I have the opportunity to test a lot of motorcycles at the editorial office, I try to choose them carefully. I try to choose them according to, I would say, my physical limitations. So you know what? I don't go for something like a big GS Adventure, not to mention the Honda Africa Twin Sport or something like that, where I can't even touch the ground with my toes. But the first thing I do when I get on a bike is check if I can, so to speak, push it off the side stand with my foot so that it stands upright, and if it happens to fall over, whether I can pick it up by myself. So those are important things for me, because then I feel much more comfortable while riding, like I'm in control of the vehicle, and not that its weight is overwhelming me, or something like that. Exactly, that mastodon-like feeling, right?
And as for, well, yes, the seat is actually quite low and narrow. I rode it myself. Well, it's soft, it's nice, but I only rode it for a dozen or so kilometers, so it's really just a first impression. And do you think the seat is comfortable enough to ride on for longer?
Listen, you know what? Not once during all my rides on this motorcycle over several hundred good kilometers did I ever think about the seat. Which means it's just as it should be, right? Because you know what? I only thought about it when I switched to other motorcycles. I was like, damn, it was nice, on that Vogue.
Yeah, because it's so soft.
You know what? It's pretty soft and it's narrow, so I can easily reach the ground with my feet. And you know what? It suits me.
Just like we talked about, it's like you get on it and you really feel like you're part of the motorcycle. I love that feeling because then you feel a bit more confident.
Yeah, it's like, you get on and you feel like you're not just sitting on the bike, but in the motorcycle because it kind of wraps around you. It's partly because of that sculpted tank in the front, partly because of the shaped seat in the back. And I think that's why I feel like I have a better sense of the machine.
And what about fuel consumption?
Listen, fuel consumption, I absolutely couldn't manage to get it to go over 3 liters, no matter how aggressively or carefully I rode it, which was quite surprising and a bit frustrating.
Remember, you were mostly riding on national roads, not highways, right?
Yes, but you know what? Compared to those other 300S, it definitely has less power. And that has to have some effect as well. Less power just means it uses less fuel. Granted, the differences aren't huge, not by the hectoliters, but let's say around half a liter, maybe 0.7 liters. But really, on top of that, the fuel tank is 16 liters.
So with that fuel consumption,
Yeah, with that fuel consumption, in theory, you could go 500 kilometers. And you know what? In practice, I don't really remember having to stop at the gas station that often. And in terms of range, it's a real adventure bike.
so what? Can we say that we might be facing changes in the global motorcycle market as we know it? Because brands are emerging where, let's be honest, the motorcycle just works. It's effective. It doesn't, fall apart. It doesn't break down. No, it didn't make you afraid to ride it anywhere. In my opinion, it rides better than I expected.
And it even looks good too, because let's be honest, they've really put a lot of work into the aesthetics of the vehicle. It's not, how should I put it, like a few years ago when everything was aggressively, straight out of manga movies, right? And, it's not some kind of little dragon or, a feathered serpent.
At the same time, it's not some vulgar copy of something else either. You can see the influences, but it's as if they've combined several different styles.
Yeah, that's true. It didn't remind the rest of the editorial team of this, but to me, because of that fuel tank with the side panels, it kind of reminds me of the Harley Pan America. It's really flat here, and at the front is kind of weird,
And what if something like that appeared? It would be called the Harley Mini Pan America, Harley Pan Slovakia, and I'd bet my head that people would just go crazy for a new Harley, a Harley for 20,000, a touring bike. Bravo, bravo, bravo.
Listen, it seems like it was really close to actually happening, what you're talking about. However, fortunately or unfortunately, the CEO at Harley changed and, so to speak, drove the Chinese factory out. Well, maybe not drove them out, but basically refused to continue working with the Chinese factory. The project stayed in China and will be produced, but it just won't be called Harley.
So what now? Voge is actually pretty cool, and we're curious to see what the coming years will bring with this brand and others.
Yeah, the basic problem is that the brand needs time to settle in and take root in the market, and suddenly it turns out that people want to ride it. And through word of mouth, the news spreads that, they run well, they don't break down. I have no doubt it'll be the same with Vogue.
Because we forgot to mention that this is sponsored content, but as always, it's honest. Did you lie at any point here?
No, I didn't lie. What's more, I won't be lying when I say that I simply like the way this motorcycle looks and I really enjoyed riding it.
Yeah, and I won't be lying when I say that, even though I'm going to take it for another ride now. My first impressions are honestly much better than I expected. I have no idea where you can see or buy this motorcycle. I guess you have to look around a bit. Barton Motors is the distributor, and I think you have to put in a bit of effort to track down this motorcycle.
Exactly, and it seems to me that for now the biggest problem with this motorcycle in Poland is that when I tried to get some technical data for testing to read up on it, the website was temporarily not working.
I saw that the website is up now, but it's still missing the kind of information you would want.
Well, yes, but let's not nitpick. The motorcycle has only been on the market for, what, a month? So I think it's safe to say that by next season, people will be much more familiar with this brand, especially the network, because, buying a motorcycle isn't really the problem. You can go to the other end of Poland, but, having to travel to the other end of Poland for service, most people just don't want to do that. So for Barton, I think there's a serious task ahead, building a reasonably dense service and spare parts network, and then it'll be fine.
Voge, once again, is actually pretty good. I think that if you get a chance to ride it, you should write your own opinions, for example. Oh, maybe it'll work out. As for the first person who gets on the Voge and racks up 10,000 kilometers, we'll ask them for their opinion. We'll come up with some souvenirs or maybe organize a get-together.
Exactly. Well, I guess that's all about the Vogue. Time to get on and ride. Thanks.
Thank you. Maybe next time we'll manage to get even better sound or keep everything from falling apart. Bye! Do you think it recorded?